And welcome to the November 13th, 2025 meeting of the CNU Community Powers Community Advisory Committee. My name is Luis Montelo Adams, and I represent the city of San Diego. Chair Harris is unable to join us today, so I will be stepping in to chair this meeting. We'd like to start by welcoming members of the public, San Diego Community Powers staff, and committee members joining us in person and online today. Thank you also to Community Powers staff for making this in-person meeting possible and the Port of San Diego for accommodating us today. I will now call the meeting to order. Assistant Clerk of the Board, Sandra Zensis, will you call the roll?
Committee member Sclafani.
Present.
Committee member Gonzalez.
Present.
Committee member Hammond. Committee member Hoyt.
Present.
Committee member Anderson.
Present.
Committee member Sumner. Committee member Castañeda. Committee member Emerson.
Here.
Committee member Vasilakis. Secretary Pike.
Present.
Vice Chair Montero Adams.
Present.
Chair Harris. We have a quorum.
Perfect. With that quorum, I will now lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We would also like to take a moment to respectfully acknowledge the Kumeyaay Nation, or the original inhabitants of the land now known as San Diego, where this meeting is taking place. Today, we carry their legacy forward, ensuring that their traditions continue to thrive, gratitude, and strength, and we stand with the Kumeyaay Nation, connected to our past and committed to a more just, sustainable, and resilient future for all. Mentioned, a quorum is present. First up on the agenda is special presentations and introductions. We would like to give a warm welcome to Anna Labrisa, Senior Origination Associate, and Jackson Welch, Portfolio Analyst, joining Community Powers Power Services team. Would you like to introduce yourselves?
Everyone, my name is Jackson Welch. I'm a portfolio analyst on the Power Services team, and I'm coming from Southern California, Edison. I studied environmental economics and policy at UC Berkeley, and I'm very excited to join this SDCP team. Thank you.
Welcome.
Hi, y'all. My name is Anna LaCruz, and I'm a senior origination associate. I'm joining from a tech company called Level 10 Energy, where I worked on PPAs up in Seattle, Washington. So recently relocated from there to San Diego. Before that, I grew up on the East Coast and was working at a developer there doing local and DG development in Maine. So really excited to be here and combine some big utility work with some of my background in DG development. So happy to be here and great to meet you all.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Well, welcome to you. Thank you so much for joining the team. I believe that concludes the special presentations for today. Are there? We'll start off by asking: are there any items on the agenda to be withdrawn or reordered?
There are none, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Seeing none, we will now take up non-agenda public comment. Thank you, Emma. Member Hammond.
Member Hammond, can you hear us?
Hi, yes, I was having computer issues getting on. It kept timing out, logging out. I was just raising my hand to be promoted to part of the team. Thank you.
Welcome, Member Hammond, but always a pleasure to hear the background list. Seeing no items need to be withdrawn or reordered, we will now take up non-agenda public comment. Written public comments submitted before the committee meeting are emailed to all CAC members prior to the committee meeting and will be posted on the website at the beginning of the meeting. Sandra, do we have any non-agenda public comments?
There are.
We will now move on to the consent agenda. The consent calendar contains items that can be approved as a package without discussion unless a CAC member or a member of the public requests that an item be removed for separate discussion and action. The CAC received staff reports for all items on the consent agenda, and staff provided an opportunity for questions and comments during briefings prior to this meeting. Today's consent agenda includes 7 items. Approval of the October 9, 2025 CAC meeting minutes, update on marketing, public relations, and local government affairs, update on customer operations, update on programs, update on power services, approve the 2026 meeting schedule, and lastly, recommend board adoption of resolution number 2025, approving the proposed revisions to the existing renewable and self-generation bill credit transfer tariff. Sandra, do we have any public comment on any of these items?
We do not, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you. Is there anyone who would like to remove any other item from the consent agenda for a separate vote?
Chair, just remember, I don't have the current agenda in front of me. If I could have that, that's important. Thank you so much.
Seeing no objections to the change of the consent calendar, I will now turn it over to the committee members for a motion to approve the consent agenda items 1 through 7. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Moved by member Anderson and seconded by member Russ. Clerk, please call the vote.
Committee member Sclafani.
Aye.
Committee member Gonzalez.
Aye.
Committee member Hammond.
Aye.
Committee member Hoyt.
Aye.
Committee member Anderson.
Anderson, aye.
Committee member Sumner.
Aye.
Committee member Emerson.
Aye.
Secretary Pike.
Aye.
Vice Chair Montero Adams.
Aye. We'll now move on to the regular agenda, starting with item 8, informational update on battery energy storage systems. I'll now turn it over to Lee Friedman, Senior Manager of Strategic Partnerships, to introduce the item. As a reminder to members, you may ask staff clarifying questions during the presentation, but I can ask that members wait until the end of the presentation for a full item session.
Chair, good evening, members of the board, of the advisory committee. My name is Lee Friedman, Senior Manager of Strategic Partnerships at San Diego Community Power. I'm not going to be giving you a presentation today. Somebody much better than me is here to present on battery energy storage systems, and that is CEO and President of San Diego's Clean Tech San Diego, Jason Anderson. So I'm going to invite Jason up here to provide a presentation for you all. I just want to say that we know that battery energy systems, BESS, you may have heard, people have a lot of questions about it. There've been a lot of concerns or thoughts about, what are these systems? How do they fit into our community? What do they do for us? And Clean Tech San Diego has taken a real lead in sort of not just the local clean tech community, but also in understanding, how these BESS systems can best fit into the San Diego region. There was a movement a couple of years back, a couple summers ago, by the County of San Diego potentially to do a moratorium on battery energy storage systems after some high-profile fires that happened here in the San Diego region. And in order to meet our goals, in order to meet our resilience, reliability, and 100% renewable goals, we know that battery energy storage systems has to be part of that portfolio, and those have to be also locally developed as well. And so we want to get a sense of understanding, like, how do people actually feel about these systems? So not only is Jason going to be presenting sort of an overview of battery energy storage, but also on results from a survey that was conducted of San Diegans on their sentiment around battery energy storage systems. As far as this broader presentation, we also had invited a representative from the City of San Diego Fire Department, Battalion Chief Robert Resende, to provide a public safety perspective. He will be attending and providing that perspective at our Board of Directors meeting next Thursday. Unfortunately, he got stuck at a conference this week and was not able to make it. But I encourage you to tune into our board meeting next Thursday to see and hear from Battalion Chief Robert Resende, who's a local expert on the public safety aspect of battery energy storage systems. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jason.
Thanks, Lee. I feel like Lee could have given my presentation. I should have stepped back down. Well, good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me here. Someone doing my slides, or do you want me to do them? Okay. Probably going to be horrible about telling you next slide. So you can go to the next slide. So again, my name is Jason Anderson with Cleantech San Diego. We are a renewable energy business association. We've been around for 18 years. We started as a organization when AB 32 was passed. So when California was setting policies, really to put it on the trajectory that it's on today around climate and energy, et cetera, the organization came together to really help support the development of a clean tech sector here in the San Diego region. So we work with about 135 members that represent public, private, and academic partners on a number of different things, really to support the renewable energy industry here in San Diego. Next slide. So this just real quick is what that industry looks like for us here in the region today. So you can see there close to about 40,000 jobs supported by the renewable energy industry in San Diego. This is countywide, and about a $9.4 billion impact on our regional economy. To put that in perspective, the life science industry in San Diego is a heck of a lot bigger than this, to the tune, I think, of almost $300 billion impact on the regional economy. But the clean tech economy here in San Diego continues to grow. We've been doing this economic impact study for probably the last 11 plus years or so, and year over year, the industry continues to grow here. I hope that continues to stay the same. Next slide. So before I get into my kind of presentation here, I want to touch on kind of why we're here. Next slide. And just, Lee touched on this a little bit, but obviously there's been some recent issues here locally that are really driving a lot of concern, rightfully so, about battery storage projects in our region. And so I just wanted to provide context of why I'm here and why I'm talking about what I'm talking about. But I think it's worth noting that the projects there were incidents here recently, those projects were built some years ago. And in fact, one of them at the time it was constructed was actually the largest battery storage project in the world. So we've been doing this in San Diego for quite some time. We've been really aggressive around our renewable energy goals. And that has led to why we have some of these early projects here in our region. Next slide. And to stay on this topic a little bit, just to touch on this, as we can see as we continue to see more and more battery storage in our region, in our state, in our country, the number of incidents are drastically decreasing. This is primarily due to the fact that codes and standards are changing. And it's also worth noting that none of these fires or none of these incidents have ever spread outside of the actual project site. But again, why 3 projects here in San Diego? It is because we have been an early adopter of renewable energy. We've been really aggressive. And so we've seen legacy systems here have incidents. Again, I'm not trying to diminish any sort of concern that the public has and that others have, but I want to be just transparent about kind of why we're in the situation we are here locally. To some degree, it sometimes feels like ground zero as it relates to kind of battery projects throughout the region. So next slide. And I apologize if I talk too fast, but I've been given a limited amount of time, so I'm trying to get through a lot of this. So hopefully I don't need to talk to anyone in here why batteries are important for our region, but we need them. There's obviously a number of different benefits of batteries here. Primarily, they provide backup power. They make our grid more resilient. They help manage energy costs by storing lower cost energy, primarily solar, and using that at a later time. And they support the increased adoption of and use of renewable energy. Here in San Diego, here in California and San Diego County, this is obviously extremely important, especially because we have the renewable energy goals that you all have as part of San Diego Community Power, as well as Clean Energy Alliance and others. And so we need battery storage to really help us get to where we want to go. New numbers just out today. California, I'm going to read this. California has nearly 17,000 megawatts of battery storage. With plans to reach 52,000 megawatts. You can go back to that last slide. About 52,000 megawatts by 2045. California has more installed capacity of battery storage than anywhere else on the planet, except for China. No surprise there. So these numbers continue to increase. We still need more. And that's, again, why this is so important to us. The next slide. And I hope, this is something that I think is really important to think about, but we all know what a Flex Alert is here, living in California, living in Southern California. You may not realize we have not had one since 2022. And July of 2024 was the hottest day on record, the hottest July on record. And this chart really shows why. So as we've been able to increase battery storage in our region, or in our state, our Flex Alerts have gone down. And all experts agree that battery storage is the reason why our grid is more resilient and why we haven't had Flex Alerts. So when people talk about making our grid resilient, this is exactly what this looks like. And this is exactly why batteries are important. Next slide. All right, talked on this a little bit, but battery storage projects and fires in particular, next slide, have been important or have been an issue here in the previous years. And again, previous slide. There you go. And what this is showing that as battery storage projects continue to increase, incidents start to decrease. In fact, the projects are actually becoming safer. This data set is from Electric Power Research Institute, which has been monitoring battery storage projects since 2017. And it shows that as battery storage capacity has grown pretty rapidly in recent years, the incident rate per gigawatt hour has dropped by 98%. So you can see that plunge there in 2020. And that's kind of a critical juncture in terms of a lot of what we're talking about and a lot of what Chief Rosindi, I assume, will talk about next week. Next slide. But the reason that we've kind of started to see this decline is because of this. We are now seeing national standards that really didn't exist prior to 2020. So NFPA 855 is really what everyone talks about when they talk about batteries, but this is the national standard that governs fire safety, system design, emergency response, and is developed by the National Fire Protection Association. It's updated every 3 years. It includes UL certification and a number of different kind of technical components. But this is really what is guiding the new installation of battery storage, as well as development of technology. And the next, I think the next update of this will actually be next year, and the draft of those guidelines should be released fairly soon. Next slide. And so just again, to talk about kind of what battery storage projects kind of have to go through these days, they all have to meet standards, they all have to meet associated codes, certifications, testings, et cetera, and all are designed much differently than they were 7-8 years ago for fire safety. They have sensors that monitor the system, the temperature, and many fire kind of suppression systems. They are also housed in containers that are spaced with enough distance so that neighboring containers don't have an incident when a container next to it does. So that picture on the screen there is the incident that happened up in Escondido. Did exactly what it was supposed to do. The fire was contained to the individual storage container and didn't actually spread anywhere outside of that. So, and this was one of the older projects that was designed a little bit differently prior to what I was talking about from NFPA 855 and UL certification. All right, so next slide with all that background. So what do San Diegans want? So we at Clean Tech San Diego and the folks that we work with that kind of are in and around the battery industry kind of took a step back and realized that there was a lot of public sentiment, a lot of public concern around batteries. We were kind of just in our own echo chamber, every day kind of scratching our heads, and needed to really understand what the broader community of San Diegans, and when I say San Diegans, I mean kind of the county, what they really thought about kind of battery storage projects, just given what they had heard. And so last year, late last year and into early this year, we launched an effort to really do that work and really understand where the public sentiment is on battery storage projects. Next slide. So just to note real quick before I talk about that, this effort that we undertook was not associated with any project either built or under development or going through the permitting process. It was independent in nature. It was informed by industry, about public safety professionals, about our friends at Labor. And it also included a lot of kind of secondary research that we did kind of a little bit broader just on the industry and kind of the market in general. Next slide. So we hired professionals, obviously, to do this work for us, which included a PR firm and a market research firm. And it's worth noting, we were very adamant about making sure that the sample size was truly representative of San Diego and matched census data for key demographics and population. So that was built into it. I'll say this presentation on this survey alone is 80 plus slides. There's a ton of data in there. I'm not going to bore you with that today. But I'll just kind of go through some of the really high level things, but there's a lot of background on kind of the inputs and the output that we received as part of the survey. It's also worth noting that we were really, we didn't plan this well. This survey actually went out into the field right after the LA wildfires and right after Moss Landing, the fire at Moss Landing. In hindsight, that was a really great thing because fires were on everyone's mind because of LA, and obviously battery storage fires were very similar just because of Moss Landing. So our timing wasn't great. I was a little nervous, I have to be honest, going into this, but I'll share with you the results, and I think hopefully you'll feel the same way that I do at the conclusion of this. Next slide. So before we got into kind of the depths, and again, there's 80 plus questions part of this. I'm not going to go through all those today. But we just started with just a sentiment of where people are right now. And no surprise to any of us in this room, cost continues to remain a very top concern of San Diegans. Obviously, housing and utility costs being 1 and 2 up there. I can't read this from here. Hopefully you can. But it's also worth pointing out that jobs in the economy, along with climate change, still are on people's minds here in our region, kind of even with the concerns that people have about just cost in general. So next slide.
Interestingly, wildfire is number 4.
Yeah. You can read that. Thank you. So wildfire too still sits up there at top, and along with some of these things that we really need to be thinking about. So moving to the next slide, we also just wanted to understand where San Diegans kind of stood on issues that we thought are important, and that is our transition away from fossil fuels into more clean energy. So this slide, it was just simply asking people, do they support our transition away from fossil fuels to clean energy? And 65% said yes. That, when I talk to elected officials and others that are really focused on numbers, that's a significant majority, and that means something. So I think hopefully that gives you all a little bit of security in what you're doing and the work you're doing and the work that SDCP is doing, that people still believe we're on the right path as it relates to our energy. Moving to the next slide, we also asked them why they support that. Why do they support our kind of getting off fossil fuels? And it still remains very strong that climate change and the impacts of climate change on our community is still a very important issue to San Diegans. The next, kind of the one down from that, which hovers around 10%, was cheaper energy. So people understand that climate change is real. I think people are starting to understand too that renewable energy is really cost competitive to fossil fuels. That doesn't go to the next slide though. Those that oppose kind of our transition away from fossil fuels to renewable energy oppose it because they say it's more expensive than traditional renewables. So obviously, I think we all know that that's not the case anymore, but just something that we wanted to understand participants in this survey. I will say this survey was conducted online in English and in Spanish. People chose the language that they wanted to conduct it in. We had a pretty small budget, so doing it in a bunch of different languages just wasn't in that. But moving on, and the reason I bring that up is because we wanted to make sure in the next slide, you'll see there on the top, we did it online simply because we wanted to show people what we were talking about. We didn't want them to think that we were just talking about batteries in their iPhone or their computer, but we really wanted to help them understand when we were talking about batteries and when we were talking about batteries, exactly what we meant. And so, again, you can't see it well there. Obviously, people on the screen could see it, but we showed them, what a battery storage project looked like. So when we asked people if they have a positive opinion on residential battery storage, those are in our home. I learned today that there are over 200,000 residences in California that have some sort of form of storage like this. Again, 60+% approve or support battery storage in homes. So again, still strong responses that we're getting as part of this survey. Next slide. We also asked them about commercial battery storage projects. So things that are a little bit bigger, a little bit closer to home, but not in the home. And again, 63% of those that we talked to as part of this survey support commercial battery storage projects. We then moved it on, next slide, to the big folks and really talked about kind of our large standalone battery storage projects. And again, 57% support those types of projects. So these were all, quite honestly, surprising to some degree that we still see a really positive response to battery projects just in general. Next slide. We then kind of drilled it down a little bit more local here into San Diego and started asking people, what do they think about battery projects here in our region? And 66% support battery storage projects in the county. Took it a little bit closer. And we even went down and with the next slide into their own neighborhood. And here's what we found. A clear majority still support battery storage projects in their neighborhoods. So even with wildfires on everyone's mind, even with kind of the world's largest battery project or battery storage incident kind of happening just several weeks before, we've got a very clear majority from the general public supporting clean energy, supporting battery storage, and even supporting battery storage projects in their neighborhood. So moving on, again, ton of information behind this. We can drill down into supervisorial district in terms of the responses from ages and gender and ethnicity and all that kind of stuff. Not going to share all that today. But one of the things we also wanted to test with this crowd, both those that supported and those that opposed it, again, part of this was not only to understand what the public sentiment was, but as we started to move forward, how are we talking about battery storage projects in a way that relates to people and they can understand? So I won't read through this, but what we really wanted to do is just test different kind of message points, facts, et cetera, about battery projects and why they're important. And so you'll see there, the first one kind of goes in line with what we heard in kind of the earlier part of the survey, is that battery storage projects increase clean energy use and decrease our fossil fuel use, which means cleaner air. So still that kind of environmental climate change stuff at the top. One of the things I thought was really interesting, and every time there's someone from a dais or something is talking about a battery, they always pull out their iPhone as an example. That kind of resonated with 48% of the folks. So that wasn't something that really is something that is effective when communicating with people around about batteries. They don't really think about it in terms of their laptop or their iPhone, and especially as it relates to kind of what we're talking about. It's kind of an apples and oranges comparison. So that was something interesting to us. And it was really the only time in our survey that we kind of got technical and we talked about a specific type of battery. In hindsight, I don't know that we would have necessarily done that, but I think what it gave us was, this pulling out your iPhone and kind of showing it and say, we all have these in our back pockets. I don't think that people really care about that. And as we go forward and talk about batteries, we really want to talk about kind of what is kind of highlighted above that. And again, I think Lee's going to share these slides, or you're welcome to share these slides so you can dig a little bit deeper into this information.
Yeah, please do. I'm delighted to.
And I'm not a technical expert, but I'll try to answer questions. I'm definitely not a market researcher or a pollster, which is why we hired the professionals to do that. All right, so moving forward, why is this important? Why did we do this? And what did we really find out? And I think what we found out, obviously, was San Diegans want clean energy. Batteries are critical to reliable, resilient, clean energy grid. And what we're learning and what we know is that battery storage fires, the risk of those continues to be low. And this is all important because if we're going to meet our goals and if we're going to get to where we need, both from a renewable energy perspective and a battery storage perspective, local governments and community choice programs need to take action to make sure that we're supporting these projects. Next slide. Again, just kind of backdrop. This is all important because there's climate action plans all throughout San Diego County. Many of them call for what you're doing, what Clean Energy Alliance is doing around renewable energy goals. And so in order to meet 90% or 100% renewable energy goals that we have for our region, we need more battery storage projects. Next slide. And one of the things that we want to talk about too is that, this is a local issue. These projects are important. They can be located out in the desert at a very large scale, but they also need to be close to the source of electricity to reduce grain constraints, congestion. If they were all 100 miles plus away, that would just mean we need much more transmission lines to get that energy into the San Diego region. Next slide. And so as these projects are going through the permitting process at the local level, we really need to talk to, well, how are these really benefiting local communities? Obviously, there's job creation as part of this. This includes, millions in sales tax, and then on a recurring basis, property tax, just based on the assessed value of the land. Project construction as part of the project obviously creates jobs for our friends in the labor community. And then while operations and kind of maintenance of those are a little bit lower just in terms of job creation, it's still important for regions to understand that these projects are creating jobs in addition to all the other things that we've been talking about. Also, it's very common, as it should be, for developers to partner with local communities if they're going into to support certain projects that kind of are adjacent to and by adjacent, I mean just kind of in the energy space, but that are important to for local communities. So this is all something that I think is very important as we start to hopefully see more and more battery storage projects in our region. So to wrap up, just big kind of headlines here. Next slide. Battery storage is critical to deliver clean energy future that we want and that our economy needs. That is very clear from us from the survey. We have had significant strides here locally with battery storage projects, but we are far from where we need to be. It is, I think, hopefully comforting to many that our national fire protection standards, certification, testing has all evolved and has made a very huge difference on kind of the improvement of these types of projects and more importantly, the safety associated with those. And it's important that regional energy providers, San Diego Community Power included, all have renewable energy goals, and batteries are a very significant part of that goal. So we're going to need more of them to meet our region's energy and climate goals. And I think, and I hope we're in a much better position than we were, let's say, last year, as we start to see projects come online here in San Diego. So with that, I'll pause. I didn't go too long. But happy to answer questions that I can. I'm not a first responder. I'm not a batteries engineer. So I may defer some questions if they get too technical, but happy to talk a little bit about the work that we've been doing and obviously the importance of what we're doing here in San Diego.
Obviously, I didn't turn my phone off.
Didn't.
I will start off by asking Sandra, well, actually, let me start off by saying thank you so much for that informative presentation. That was fantastic. Sandra, do we have any public comment on this?
Within Officer Chair.
Great, thank you. I'll now turn it over to the CAC members for discussion. Does anyone have any questions? Member Anderson, please.
No relation, but that I know.
Well, I have SENs and SONs in my family.
All right.
First of all, fabulous presentation and great data. I know you're not a pollster, but a couple of details about the survey. What was the sample size?
So the sample size was about 900,
Okay,
which was much larger than we needed to go.
absolutely.
But the gentleman, the firm that we hired understood kind of what we were doing and why we were doing it. And so wanted to make sure that we were getting a pretty sizable sample size.
In your sampling frame, was it a random sample or a stratified sample? Do you know anything about that?
I believe it was random, but don't hold me to that. I'm pretty sure that's that. And there was actually a slide that had all that information. So I took it out because I didn't know that it was important, but I can put it back in for the deck that's shared.
And how will you share the deck?
It is currently in the back of information,
Yeah.
but we will, I think we can make sure a copy is just sent out to the members of the committee.
Thank
And
you.
happy to include some of those, maybe as a follow-up, if there's some follow-up questions, then we can pop in some of the other slides or send those separately.
Great data. Thank you.
Thank you.
Member Gonzalez, did I see your hand?
Yeah, you sure did. Thanks. Thanks for the presentation. So I'm already understanding that community power on the record saying that we've supported public implementation and the development of the battery energy storage systems. But you mentioned at the end of your presentation that a regional power provider should take action to help them develop and be able to get past that lukewarm reception that I've witnessed some cities take up, just like err on the side of caution and make sure that they vet. What kind of actions do you think would be appropriate? And do you think kind of vetting projects, specific projects could be part of that process and being a champion at a specific level? Or is it more appropriate to be a kind of regional setting from a PR perspective?
Yeah, I think there's a number of ways to think about that. So I would say from a community power perspective, many of these projects that are being proposed go to, for the most part, most of them will make it to, let's say, a city council or the county board of supervisors once they have a PPA in hand. So when there's kind of some market certainty there, then they'll move forward with the permitting process. So that in and of itself is a pretty strong kind of value proposition for the developers. They move forward that they have some sort of contractual delivery to either SDG&E, SDCP, CEA, whoever it may be. So that's a kind of a first-ish step. San Diego Community Power, I will say, has been really great about those projects that they have PPAs signed with. Going in front of that jurisdiction and weighing in on the importance of the project to kind of its portfolio. So that's happening. Whether that be staff or some of the board members of the cities. And that kind of brings up another point is that many of these projects are being permitted by the cities that represent that SDCP represents. And so I think it's important for those representatives of the cities that sit on the SDCP board to also be very strong advocates for the project as it goes through kind of the approval process at their end. So it's a little bit layered in a number of different ways. I also think as I have the pleasure of sitting through council meetings and supervisor meetings as these projects go through, it's not often that people just kind of show up and support a project if they don't have some sort of affiliation with it. However, those that oppose the project will come from far and wide to oppose a project just because whether it's an NIMBYism or whatever it may be. So, maybe a call to action kind of from me to you all is, sitting where you sit, kind of representing the community as it relates to San Diego Community Power. Your voice in these processes of support from a community perspective, I think could be very valuable, again, as these projects go through the approval process.
Quick follow-up question.
Please do, and then we'll go to Member Hammond and then Member Summer.
Appreciate it. That makes all the sense in the world. So you help track projects, but like you mentioned, it's rare to have proponents of projects show up. It's even more rare when they're looking at zoning and code changes, something that would make it harder in the process. It would be extremely rare to have somebody chime in and say, hey, how battery storage is it. But tracking that might be something that we could continue to be engaged in. And maybe, are you a 501c4?
You're not. Thanks for bringing that up. That creates some issues for me as an organization. So when we go in, we really talk a little bit more holistically about projects and what they mean for kind of our energy system here, as opposed to lobbying, which is kind of what you're getting at, I think, on a very specific kind of component of it as it relates to a zone change or something like that.
Educating on zone
Exactly.
changes might be a possibility.
Your words, no, I suppose.
Thank you.
I will say too, just something to be aware of next week on, I think it's Wednesday, the county at night is kind of having a public forum on some of their zoning and code updates as it relates to battery storage systems. So, if you have nothing better to do, it might be worth just kind of listening in there. I think what's interesting too is, these projects are newish. And so it takes a lot of work from a kind of a staff perspective at these jurisdictions to kind of get up to speed on the technology and all of the different kind of details. And so, I think the industry understands that well and is happy to provide information and help them out as to the extent that they can, as is Chief Resende and others that are in this space. Thanks for your questions.
Member Hammond?
Thank you. Thank you, Jason. I just wanted to note, I remember hearing after a couple of those fires, people talking about the dangers, and I think there's some legitimacy, but as Jason has addressed, and the manufacturers are addressing the different ways to make batteries safer and how those have been contained. The alternative is using more fossil fuels, and we know fossil fuels are accelerating the climate crisis. We are having worse fires that are literally killing people and wiping out communities. And so just a fellow community advisory committee members, when you hear people talking about, oh, well, what if it's a fire, or what happened to those, that the alternative, fossil fuels do cause fires. They do have explosions. There are refineries that are creating environmental injustices to communities all over the world. So just kind of putting that into perspective.
And if I can, just on that topic real quick, and I would encourage you all to tune in next week and listen to Chief Rosindi. We're very fortunate here in San Diego that we have someone like Chief Rosindi. He is a kind of a public safety, fire safety expert as it relates to renewable energy projects, battery storage projects being actually one of those. There's not a lot of people like him that kind of, wear his uniform around the rest of the country, which is why we don't get to have him where we want him all the time here locally, because he's being kind of pulled in a bunch of different directions to outside communities. But we're really fortunate to have someone like him who really understands this, and it can really communicate how his department and other departments around the region are prepared or preparing for any sort of incident. I think he says something like he lives in the 1%, and that's not a great place to live. And so you always have to be prepared. So I think we're really fortunate here in this region that our public safety professionals, our fire safety professionals in particular, are really getting up to speed on this technology, and have someone like Chief Rosindi who is really out there learning and educating himself and his colleagues on kind of just battery projects in general. So
thank you very much for a great presentation. And there's two questions I have, and they're somewhat related. So, what can a public agency like Community Power do in order to maybe better set the table for these development projects? Kind of help the community might get solid product. It's one thing to sort of react, to point out there's a market and to react to the market. It's another thing to be more intentional about setting the table and inviting these kinds of projects in sort of a structured and planned way. Is there anything that Community Power can do, or some of these municipalities can do, to be more proactive on from the planning?
the last person that wants to tell San Diego Community Power what to do. And I will say they're doing a lot in regards to, there's only so much resources out there, right? And that's a big issue. And so making sure that, what I think would be really helpful is if the member agencies really identified potential areas where these projects make sense, and kind of push those out into the broader market and let the industry respond to whether or not they're feasible, feasible, whatever it may be. And so I think that's a big component of it, is just working together with the member agencies to identify kind of the right site that makes sense for projects, and that's projects that are obviously in the right zone, close to substations, et cetera. So I think just being more proactive about that and communicating with the member agencies that these types of projects are important to Community Power's overall mission, for local project support, et cetera, and also its mission to increase renewable energy capacity in our region. So I believe that a lot of that's happening. I don't think anything else needs to be done, but I think more of it could be done, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation. I am very interested in this topic. I serve on the fire board and the planning group, where I hear about this more than any other topic from my constituents. Especially because we at National Fire Safety Week, lithium-ion battery was the focus this year. Of the 900 sampled, what percentage of that was in unincorporated San Diego County?
That is a great question. I do not have that off the top of my head. I can share that with you because we have that breakdown, and we have the breakdown, as I said earlier, by district. So I can share that with you. And I'll definitely put that in my presentation for next week, but I'll follow up with you on that and make sure you have that. Yeah.
If by chance there was anything around Fallbrook, I'd like to hear that, because SDG means.
Yeah, I'll say it's probably no surprise that that part of the county is much lower in the support. And I believe, I haven't looked at it in a while, but I believe it falls below 50%, kind of in that kind of neck of the woods of San Diego County, which is understandable, makes total sense, just kind of given the geography and kind of landscape out there and a number of different things. So, but happy to share that with you.
Emails and stuff, but yeah.
What's that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I will close this out with one final question. Sorry, please, Member Emerson.
So you're making a presentation here. Have you ever gone and made a similar presentation to city council?
Yeah, I have actually. So I've done, working with the part of the San Diego Regional Chamber. We brought in, members from all cities in the region to do kind of a briefing on this. And then as kind of projects start getting talked about in communities, then I'll go in and meet with, city council members as well.
Okay.
And doing the same thing. I've done something very similar to this that I'm doing next week at the board, with Clean Energy Alliance as well. So it's a big education effort, not only for the public, but the elected officials as well.
You go back to the graph where you show the decrease in fires and increase in.
That's close to the beginning.
That was one of them. So, yeah, that one, so that one, and there was one a little bit after this, so. That's bad on us. So this is showing different years, 2018, and each of those numbers mean this is California or where's?
This is global. This is on kind of a global perspective as battery storage projects continue to rise and projects slowly go down. Yeah.
Just in the United States, or right, not just California. So like the first one, 16 would be a specific site, 16 specific sites that were at energy storage.
That is the amount of gigawatts. So it's a
Gigawatts.
Yeah. So it's not a number of projects. It's actually the amount of energy there.
Energy, and then the graph, the curve up is cumulative.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay.
And then that next slide, which I think was like 3 or 4. Right there.
Or after that,
Yeah, right there, right? Yeah. Again, that's actually repetitive of that previous slide, just in a different context here. Again, just showing that the number of incidents could fall. And again, just to hammer on the point there is that you see that after 2020, which is when, at least here in the States, the NFPA, APEP 5 yield certification, et cetera.
and there was one other, you said there was one after this, there was a line that said there were 3 battery fires that year, but 350,000 home structure fires. And you know where those 3 battery, going, I pointed out to you, you had several lines of percentages. Yes, I think it was.
Okay, yeah.
Almost at the bottom.
Yeah.
58.4%.
That's in the US.
That's in the US.
Yeah. Again, the comparison there is 3 battery storage projects versus 350,000.
When I tried.
That weren't battery projects, just homes in general.
When I tried to save YouTubes of natural gas explosions or gasoline station fires, after a couple months, they seem to disappear. You hear all this news about battery fires.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
One final question. Thank you for your time. The polling was really interesting to show that there was overwhelming support for a variety of locations and variety of types of storage. Was there any part of the poll or subsequent polls that you're planning that would ask the participants to rank their preference, both of where storage should be happening and who should be paying for it? Is, kind of the idea in my head is, should it be a public utility expense? Should it be a subsidized residency expense? Do people want it at home, nearby, further away? We're seemingly the public is in favor of storage. But how do we prioritize where and who and how?
Yeah. We didn't go into that granular of kind of information. I think location wise, it shows obviously kind of countywide, and then kind of in your own neighborhood, but we didn't go that deep into kind of location specific, I guess. And then, to your other point, who's paying for it?
Yeah. Okay, great. Well,
I'm just gonna ask one more question.
Yes.
And if you don't have the numbers now, but you mentioned 200,000 residential battery systems in California.
Yes.
And
That number just came out today, so I guarantee you I have no follow-up answers.
I would be just interested compared to, I know we have more than 1,000,000 solar systems,
Mhm.
but I would be interested if what the percentage is And then for San Diego County, what are the numbers for San Diego County for battery energy storage for solar and just solar?
Yeah.
That would be interesting if you.
Those numbers are there. I have them somewhere because I've seen them, but I don't know them off the top of my head. But I will say, you know, again, the governor, I believe, is I think COP's going on right now, but kind of did a big release on the amount of battery storage. So that press release just came out today. I assume will surface in some sort of local outlet at some point.
I'm looking for a second.
All right, thank you guys. Thank you very much.
This is a file or receive and file item, and no further action is needed. So thank you all. Next, we will move on to item number 9, an update on regulatory and legislative affairs. I will turn it over to the regulatory and legislative affairs team to provide a presentation. As was the case with our last item, please wait until the end of the presentation for questions and discussion.
Thank you. Thank you, Patrick Welch, Associate Director of Legislative Affairs. A short and brief presentation, 4 slides, and I'm going to turn it over to my coworker, Stephen Gunther, to begin a presentation on regulatory updates. We come to you quarterly, as we do with the board, to provide an oral update on what's happening in the legislative and regulatory realm. I'll be talking today about the state legislature and what happened and the outcomes in the 2025 legislative session. Just a quick note, you'll see if you look at the staff report, there's actually nothing in there this month. That's because the legislature is out of session. So I'm pulling forward information from the prior staff report for this quarterly update because the legislative session ended on September 13th. This year, 917 bills were sent to the governor to sign or veto. 794 of those bills were signed into law. Community Power tracked and analyzed around 170 bills this year. 76 of those were passed and signed by the legislature, so roughly 50%. And 51 of those 76 that were passed were ultimately signed into law. Pursuant to our board-approved legislative platform, which has really 3 main legs to it: stabilizing community choice, supporting local development, and accelerating deep decarbonization. We engaged on 11 bills, supported 11 bills, and took an opposed unless amended position on 2 bills, so a total of 13 bills. 6 supported bills were signed into law, 3 stalled in the legislative process, and 2 were ultimately vetoed. The 2 bills that we took an opposed unless amended position on did not make it to the governor's desk and failed during the legislative process. We also engaged on 2 funding efforts. I'll get into a little bit more detail on these in the next slides. One of which was I'd call reasonably successful, and one of which did not get appropriated by the legislature. Just to note, the 2026 legislative session is just around the corner, starting January 5th of next year. So it's a little context and background. Next slide, please. Okay, so some of the bills and outcomes of what we supported. Important for this body, there were some Brown Act reforms. So the Community Advisory Committee or Board adheres to the Brown Act for public meeting purposes. SB 707 was a global omnibus reform of the Brown Act. Included in that was a provision from a bill we supported, SB 239. Ultimately, that bill was parked, that language was moved, ported over and amended into SB 707 as part of a broader reform package. What that does is it says subsidiary bodies like the Community Advisory Committee can basically use streamlined teleconferencing procedures between 2026 and 2030. So it's going to make it a little bit easier for this body. There's some components that have to come with, for example, the board will have to approve this once a year, but it'll make it a little bit easier if the body needs to meet remotely or if certain members need remotely. So I think that's something that we saw as really positive, is balancing being able to hold these meetings with community access as well. A couple other bills notable based on related to Jason's presentation, SB 283, something we supported, new fire inspections for battery energy storage systems of 10 megawatts or larger. SB 302 aligns state tax law with federal tax law on clean energy tax credits. Pretty complicated exactly what it does, but there's transferable tax credits. State law will no longer tax those transferable credits, just like federal law. That'll save about 1% to 6% on a PPA potentially. Next slide, please. as part of the second, kind of the preeminent legislative thing that happened this year on the energy front was a pretty robust energy and climate legislative package that was signed into law. Really had 3 legs to it. The first one is something that we actively supported throughout the year. AB 825 is going to allow the California Independent System Operator to run through an independently governed regional market organization starting in 2028. Right now, the CAISO, the California Independent System Operator, operates a balancing authority and energy market for 80% of California. It's what we buy and trade our power in. This is going to say we can partner with other utilities and load serving entities around the rest of the West, broaden the footprint of trading partners that we have. What that has been shown to do is bring down generation costs by up to $1 billion a year for Californians. It will reduce natural gas generation in California by potentially up to 31% because you're using more efficient dispatch of resources, and increase grid reliability. So it's something that we think is going to be really good for cost, for affordability for customers and for grid reliability and achieving our climate goals as well. 2 other bills as part of that. SB 254 was omnibus energy bill, really focused on creating a new wildfire fund for the investor-owned utilities to deal with claims that may be filed against them for wildfires sparked by their equipment. In addition, they'll be required to spend $6 billion on wildfire prevention without earning a rate of return on it. A number of other provisions were included in that bill, including a new public transmission infrastructure accelerator, which will be a 5-year project to fund a number of transmission projects with public dollars as opposed to private dollars, and hopefully save some money on the needed transmission in the state. And then finally, AB 1207 extended and renamed our state's cap and trade program, which was set to sunset in 2030. It will now be known as Cap and Invest. That will now run by law through January 1st of 2046. An important thing for Community Power and our customers in there is that continues the California climate credit that people receive on their bill twice a year. That comes from cap and trade allowance proceeds. They're going to reform that as a result of this bill a little bit. It'll probably be shifted to get in the summer months, but that continues that funding mechanism through 2045. Next slide, please. So let's review vetoes, some of the funding mechanisms or funding advocacy efforts that I referred to. 2 bills we supported were vetoed by the governor, really based on costs to the state, duplication of efforts already underway. AB 44 would have really required the Energy Commission to enshrine into their regulations or into their publications their load modification protocols. This is a process we use for our solar battery savings program. This would have formalized that process and saved it on the books into perpetuity. Unfortunately, the governor vetoed that due to cost pressures to the state. Related, he also vetoed a bill we supported that would have put forward a statewide virtual power plant deployment plan that we thought was really complementary to what our organization is trying to do on the VPP front as well. On the funding outcomes, we were successful in advocating for money for the Distributed Electricity Backup Assets Program, or DEBA. $46.1 million is going to that program with the Energy Commission. That funds essentially battery projects with a preference for battery projects at water agencies, but can also be residential as well. So we think that's a really unique opportunity. We also supported funding for a demand-side grid support program. It's kind of a sister program, more of a demand response focus, also focuses on batteries as well. The legislature didn't need that they put forward to appropriate for that program. And then finally, we also took opposed less amended positions on 2 bills. One would have created a new statewide a demand management oversight task force to make binding recommendations about customer programs, including programs offered by San Diego Regional Energy Network and programs that would be approved by our board. We expressed concerns about this with respect to our governing board's autonomy and local control to offer and develop programs without state ability to say yes or no to those programs. That bill was actually amended and at the last minute and changed into an entirely different subject that we ended up supporting, and that would be the Regional Pathways Bill. So I think that's a good outcome for us on that piece of legislation. And then finally, we also took an opposing as amended position on AB 1295. This would have led to what we would call unbalanced reforms to customer bills at the Public Utilities Commission. We have a joint bill with San Diego Gas and Electric. This is an effort that they supported to try and make the bill align with certain projects that they have going on. Luckily, that bill was held on the Assembly Committee suspense time. Next slide. That actually is the end of my presentation. I think turn it over to Stephen, and then we'll take questions at the end. Thank you.
Thanks, Patrick. Good evening, committee members. My name is Stephen Gunther. I'm a regulatory manager at Community Power. I'll be providing a presentation and update on integrated resource planning, which is the umbrella proceeding at the California Public Utilities Commission, or CPUC, for planning the state's electricity supply. It's also the venue for planning greenhouse gas emissions reductions in the electricity sector. So it's a big kind of broad proceeding that covers a lot of planning and procurement issues. We're bringing it forward today because there's been some recent activity in the IRP process that I'll speak to in the next few slides. Next slide, please. So first, to put the IRP in context of the broader planning that goes on at the state level, there's several different state agencies that are involved in planning. So starting at the top there, you have the California Air Resources Board, and they develop the scoping plan, which sets GHG reduction targets for each sector, including the electricity sector. Moving down, the California Energy Commission forecasts the expected electricity demand, both at the system level and for individual LSCs like Community Power. The IRP, which I'll be discussing tonight, models the supply of resources to meet that demand that was forecasted. And then that resource mix then forms, moving down again, the California independent system operator on where the grid needs new transmission lines or upgraded the transmission based on that resource mix. And then at the very bottom, you have load serving entities like Community Power and SDG&E that are actually out there procuring the energy and supply to fit into that forecasted energy need. Next slide, please. So that's how it fits into the broader process, but drilling down on the IRP itself, it's made up of two primary components, planning and procurement. So the planning track is exactly what it sounds like. It's a planning process where the CPUC performs needs assessments and then models future supply needs to develop future potential portfolios of the resource mix. As a part of that process, individual LLCs like Community Power are required to file our own IRP that models how we intend to serve our customers and what our projected resource mix will be. Those individual plans are then aggregated by the state to develop this preferred system portfolio. And that portfolio is used for a bunch of different purposes. Like I mentioned, it informs our transmission planning. It also informs several other proceedings, like how to calculate avoided costs or proceedings around gas planning. And then lastly, it also informs the other track, which is the procurement track. So the procurement track is when the CPUC determines that there's a gap in what we have planned and what the system needs. And they go out and mandate that LLCs like us procure a certain amount of resources to meet that need. So currently this process happens on a one-off basis when a need is determined. But the CPUC has proposed a more orderly approach that would set a regular timeline for those procurement obligations, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Next slide, please. So moving on to the recent activity, last month the commission issued a scoping memo. First they opened a new proceeding to deal with these issues for the IRP. The previous proceeding had closed, so it needed a new venue to litigate these issues. And then last month, the commission issued a scoping memo, which outlines all the issues that they plan to address within that proceeding. I'll go into a little more detail on the next few slides about the scope, but basically there are the implementation of the regular process that I described you earlier, so the cyclical planning that happens in the IRP. And then there's a few specific issues that have been raised that they want to address within this proceeding. So next slide, please. So regarding the individual IRP requirements, this set the timeline for when we're going to have to file an IRP. So Community Power will be required to file our updated plan next May. And at any day now, we expect the CPUC to release a series of templates that are used for that process. So that sets the reliability need, also the GHG emissions targets that our portfolios need to conform to. So until we have those templates, we can't really get started on this process, but it is a large endeavor that our power services team will be going through in the next few months. And then our IRPs actually need to get approved by our board of directors before we file them with the CPUC. So bringing that back, before May of next year. And the last time we went through this process was in 2022, and that plan is still live on the website for anyone who really wants to dig into the weeds on our forecasting process. But the process has been delayed, so typically it's biannual, but it's been a few years, so it'll be a big undertaking next few months. Next slide, please. So the new proceeding also included a ruling on a potential procurement order. And this is related to the process I described earlier when CPUC determines that there's a need. So staff analysis found the system may be short, according to their analysis, 6,000 megawatts in the next few years. So they're recommending that load serving entities be required to procure a portion of that total to help meet that gap. Currently, this is just a staff recommendation, and the ruling, it had a series of questions for stakeholder input on how that should be implemented, which we were involved with our trade association, CalCCA. So a final decision on whether or not this will actually be mandated to community power is expected no later than February. So we're watching closely there'll be a proposed decision first, which will allow another comment period. And then the final decision will determine whether or not we have to procure this extra energy. Next slide, please. And then lastly, the CPUC is continuing to develop a new proposed framework known as the Reliable and Clean Power Procurement Program, also known as the RCPP. And the intention of the RCPP is to move away from that ad hoc procurement order, like the one I just was speaking about. So it's not just these one-off state realizing there might be a gap and so they need to go make up for that. Instead, it would be a much more orderly process that would look 10 years out and kind of show what your steps needed to be taken to meet that long-term goal. So that proposal, the framework that's been proposed addresses both the reliability need as well as the GHG emissions targets. And each of those frameworks include the need determination, how that's allocated across LSCs, compliance requirements, and enforcement mechanisms. That's kind of the broad framework, and there's been a lot of discussion among stakeholders on how those should work. So there's a lot of implementation details. Earlier this year, there were several all-day workshops, and then there was a period of comments and alternate proposals filed by different parties, and now we're waiting on the commission to move forward with the proposed decision. Generally, most stakeholders, including us, agree that a more orderly approach and more predictable approach to procurement orders is welcome, but like I mentioned, there's a lot of implementation details that still need to be worked out. So we'll be following this very closely, and there'll be more to come. But at this point, that ends my part of the presentation, and I'll pass it over to the dean.
Good evening, committee. Next slide, please. So I'm here to talk to you about SDG&E's 2026 ERA forecast proceeding. This is an annual proceeding that forecasts the cost for SDG&E's next year's generation-related costs, as well as determines the power charge indifference adjustment amount, which is the rate that CCA customers pay as departing load.
So the PCA rates allocate above market legacy generation costs from SDG&E. And it's determined by taking essentially the actual cost of that procurement and subtracting the value of the current portfolio. So, Community Power participates in this proceeding because it directly affects our customers and our rate competitiveness. So our goal is to make sure that all the costs are accurate and then costs are very fairly allocated between bundled and CCA customers. Next slide. There was a couple key issues that came up that we actually litigated on in this proceeding. One was around the use and valuation of SDG&E's banked RECs or renewable energy credits. So these are renewable energy credits that they essentially retired for RPS compliance. And they had a proposal to essentially bank a subset of RECs and value them at zero, which our position of that is essentially unfair and unfairly pushes additional costs onto CCA customers. And that any costs should be valued at a market price benchmark. Fortunately, we just got a proposed decision earlier this week, and it looks like we came out successful on that issue. The one other major issue is around which market price benchmarks should be used for the resource adequacy benchmark, because it's being litigated in another proceeding. That was essentially, those issues got ruled on outside, and that issue became moot. At the end of the day, rate impacts to SDG's customers, it looks like they're going significantly up, but you'll get additional information on that from our rates team in the next meeting. And then I'll pass it on to Aisha.
Yeah, thanks, Dean. Doing an audio check.
We can hear you.
Excellent. All right, good evening. I'm here tonight to provide an update on the proceeding that's evaluating SDG&E's application to withdraw from regional energy efficiency. Before we get into the slide here, I just wanted to emphasize what's really at stake in this proceeding. Many of the questions that are coming up in the proceeding are aimed at determining whether energy efficiency is or is not a key affordability measure. And that matters because whatever the CPUC decides in this proceeding will set precedent. And so if the commission ultimately decides that energy efficiency is a key affordability measure, that finding will strengthen the justification for SDREN's budget and all other program administrators' budgets for years to come. So it's not just about SDG&E's withdrawal, which of course is important in and of itself, but it's about the long-term foundation for funding the very programs that help keep customer bills manageable. So with that said, I wanted to cover how the timeline has evolved in this proceeding. In September, we filed legal briefs arguing that SDG&E's withdrawal is legally impermissible. At that time, we expected the CPUC to take a two-step approach. First, issue a decision in November, so this month, solely on the legal question, and then, depending on that outcome, move into a separate phase of the proceeding to address policy and factual issues in SDG&E's application. So the CPUC has since revised that plan. Instead of two decisions, now they are intending to issue just one decision that addresses legal, policy, and factual issues together. And that decision is now expected sometime between June and August of next year, as you can see here. The next major milestone we have is January, and that's when our opening testimony will be due, specifically January 15th. So the takeaway is the proceeding is no longer bifurcated, and the final decision on whether SDG&E can withdraw will arrive next summer. Next slide. Okay, so now that we're situated with the timeline here, the core policy and factual issues the commission is going to be weighing in that single decision, and the issues that our testimony due in January will address. First, we have administrative responsibility. So as a matter of policy, whether the CPUC should allow SDG&E to withdraw and whether that primary responsibility for Regional Energy Efficiency Administration should rest with SDREN or some other entity. Secondly, exploring issues related to customer affordability and ratepayer impacts. So the CPUC is interested in hearing from stakeholders how withdrawal would affect customer bills, how it would impact ratepayer benefits, as well as affordability. Third, equity and access to services. The commission wants to hear from parties on what they think the impacts of withdrawal would be on disadvantaged and hard to reach communities and needed safeguards to ensure equitable access to programs if SDG&E withdraws. Fourth, programmatic and geographic gaps. So they want to hear from parties on what overlaps or gaps in programs currently exist in the region, and then coverage if SDG&E withdraws and implications for service continuity. And finally, the CPUC has developed a set of questions for parties to weigh in on SDG&E's portfolio performance. So essentially, they want to dig into the reasons for SDG&E's performance to date, hear about potential strategies to optimize SDG&E's performance, and how energy efficiency compares to alternative investments for managing load growth. So that concludes our team's presentation. So I will pause there and hand it back to the chair.
Well, thank you so much for all those presentations. Let's start by asking Sandra, do we have any public comment on this item? Perfect. I will now turn it over to the CAC members for comments and questions. Member Anderson.
Yes, regarding the revised version of H25. Obviously, regional energy networks are very important. They can share electricity across state lines. They can, if there's a blackout in one area, they can compensate a whole host of things. How do we know the source of that energy as it crosses across state lines and into our system? I hear critiques of this, saying we don't want to be connected to Wyoming or Nevada because that's full of dirty coal-fired power plants.
Yeah, so a few things. If you look at a map of coal plants, there's actually very, very few in the West, mostly being in Montana and Wyoming. I want to say there's maybe 5 or 6 left in the West. Then to add on top of that, I think one, the regional organization has to have a process that respects each state's ability to account for greenhouse gas emissions. So in California, the CAISO can only join that organization if they can continue to use their accounting methodology, which adds a GHG adder for unspecified imports. So we can continue, if the market is designed in such a way, which I expect it will, to assess basically a financial adder to pay for that. Because there are times when you don't know what the power is. It's called unspecified power.
But we guarantee the customers 40 or 50 or 100% renewable energy.
Yeah.
So if we're importing some, does that line have a metric associated with it that says this is 20% renewable? Or?
That's a good question. I don't know off the top of my head. I suspect the answer is no, because the grid usually operates at the path of least impedance. So electrons are put in from various places and then they go where there is the least amount of resistance in the system. So what we're talking about with this market structure is not a physical transformation of the grid. It is really a paper and financial manifestation layered on top of the grid. Those electrons from Wyoming, maybe they're already traveling to our state already because we are physically interconnected to the Wyoming grid through the Western Energy Interconnect right now. This is just saying, let's all have common market rules so that when we are making contracts and we are transacting, that it's more efficient and that we have shared dispatch across grid operators so that we can more efficiently use our solar when we have too much in the day and we're actually paying negative prices, where they might need that, you know, where it's cloudy up north and we can make better use of that solar.
So without belaboring this too much, one follow-up. So when opponents of nuclear power say we got to keep the nuclear waste here, actually the proponents say we got to keep the waste here because we generated, we benefit. So now we have to deal with the waste, say it's San Onofre. Isn't that kind of a bogus argument in the San Onofre power flowed across the interlinked west as opposed to all of it being used right here?
Yeah, I mean, theoretically, you could apply that argument to any source of energy based on how I understand the physics of the grid work. I'm not an engineer, so I hate to opine with any definitive answer, but theoretically, I mean, I think someone could
Okay.
certainly make that
Thank
argument.
you.
Any other comments?
I guess I have one. I'll make one. First, thank you for the whole team. Watching you work is a pleasure, like every single one of you on your team. It's amazing what you do. I was at an event a couple weeks ago and I was writing my community power and I met a person from a technical industry. And she had said, "Oh, do you work for community power?" And I said, "No, I volunteer for community." She had a question. She lives in Northern County. She's trying to understand CCA mechanics. She said, "Well, doesn't the CCA only exist to provide lower cost?" And she's asking, "Well, how much more does it cost or less?" No, they only exist. The only point of existing is that you have to sell the power for us. And, you know, I kind of tried to say, it force public agency to lose money, this kind of thing. And, you know, I've said it before and just talking here, but I would love more visibility into your team's work and like storytelling and being able to communicate those sort of like wins that you are getting 9 layers deep in Sacramento that our communities here don't see and thus cannot appreciate. Like specifically, Dean, what you had said about identifying like the way that SDG&E wanted to handle the rec accounting, like that's its own thing and like we could debate it and whatever. But the fact that there's visibility and accountability on that accounting from the perspective of how does it benefit like the people and the rates, that's effort that your team does that is not, I don't think, visible to like the people that I have conversations with, right? So like if they're just looking at a bill and saying like, well, what's my rate? And forming a public opinion of community power, like, you know, if that's all it comes down to is pennies on a bill, then I think it does a disservice to like the whole endeavor of the agency of doing. So I thank you for all the work that you're doing, and I hope at some point we can have like little YouTube, victory stories of each of these things. Like you're all working on like important areas, and I don't know that that's going to go anywhere, but I wanted to make it known.
Thank you. For a beautiful comment. I think somewhere in there there might be an opportunity for the new website to capture some of those stories. No better way to attend that, but I will say this is a receive and file item and no further action is needed. Thank you everyone for your presentation. We will now move on to item number 10, an update on Smart Home Flex project. I will turn it over to the program team to provide their presentation.
Hello, good evening. Always glad to be back and presenting in front of this committee. So thank you for having me here. I wanted to provide a quick update on our Smart Home Flex pilot project. You may have heard about this in a lot of our program update reports that we've included throughout the year. But I wanted to specifically focus on this pilot update and just kind of give you an update of what we've done over the last summer now that we've gone into our winter rates. So if we can go to the next slide, I should say, hi everyone, Nelson Lamelli. I'm a senior program manager and in charge of this. So I forgot to make the introduction at the beginning for the record. So why are we doing this? Why are we doing the Smart Home Flex? So I think it's no surprise to everyone here that load flexibility is really a critical element of not only California's clean energy goals, but our clean energy goals as well. Load flexibility really does support the grid during extreme climate-induced events, as well as reliability and allows us to increase our renewable energy use as well. So as we bring on more renewable energy, we'll be able to do a lot more with load flexibility in our programs and also help reduce costs for everyone. So we can go to the next slide. I wanted to talk about our load flex strategy that was presented to the CAC and to the board, excuse me, to the Community Advisory Committee and to the board in 2024. So our load flex strategy really calls for increasing affordability through our load flex programming, helping support programs that, again, reduce those high costs, reduce usage during those high costs on peak energy usage, and lowers our resource adequacy and energy procurement costs so that, again, we all have lower costs for all our customers. So we've been doing this with Smart Home Flex, and this is our first attempt at this, which is to control assets that we are going to be and are incentivizing through the programs that we will be offering, both from San Diego Community Power as well as from the San Diego Regional Energy Network as well, so that we can all control and have as much load flexibility within our region as possible. So how does this all fit in? If we go to the next slide, of how does this all fit in within our strategy, our load flex strategy, and what the board has set out for our goals. So if you recall, earlier this year, our board adopted what we are giving a short name for as a virtual power plant goal. So they established a series of goals that we fit into. Load flex is about a 50 megawatt component of that overall goal. And that is really what comes into as Smart Home Flex. So one of the things you'll see down here in terms of some of the technologies and strategies that we are evaluating and also implementing right now, one of the things missing from there is batteries. And it's a conversation we've had. And this is intentional because batteries are a separate component of a goal that we have within the programs department of bringing 150 megawatts of distributed energy resources under our control. So batteries are 100 megawatts of that. For Smart Home Flex, we're really focused on this 50 megawatt goal. And this is what we've been working with. So for the pilot program, and specifically what I want to focus on for tonight's update, are really going with the smart thermostats and the heat pump water heater. Like I said, everything else that we have up there is really things that staff is evaluating and looking into what other CCAs, what other community choice aggregation programs are doing. We're also evaluating EV charging capabilities. We'll have a presentation about that later following this presentation, and looking into what can we do with commercial customers as well. So I don't want to necessarily have you look at this and be like, oh my God, they're going to do pool pumps, right? It's more of like we're evaluating all the technology out there to see what is possible and can scale to meet this 50 megawatt goal. So if we go to the next slide, this is just a quick, it's hard to see, it's different on my side. But what I want to see is just a quick timeline of the development of the Smart Home Flex pilot program. So as I mentioned, we presented our flex load strategy to the CAC and to the board back in January and March of 2024. And since then have done a series of pieces to put together into Smart Home Flex. So we did an RFP or a request for proposals for what's called a distributed energy resources management system, or as we call it, the DERMS. Not the prettiest name, but also extremely long to keep saying over and over again. And we've just been going and working through this, working with the selected DERMS provider, which is Virtual Peaker in this case, to really put together this Smart Home Flex, bring your own device pilot. We launched this pilot in January of last year, late January of this year, excuse me. And we're completely enrolled with the number of devices we had set out by March and April, by late March, early April. And then we started calling events for customers that enrolled in June. So a lot happened in this short amount of time this year, and I'm really excited just to share some of the early results. I want to call your attention to where the star is pointed right now, which is in the November-March timeframe. And that is because now that we've completed our first summer where we have devices under our control and are able to call events, we're not going to be doing an impact evaluation. So we just are in the process of hiring a vendor, a consultant to help us look at all the events that we called in the last year, look at how much energy was reduced, what does that look like, and have really a complete picture of what is the impact that Smart Home Flex had on our overall strategy and our overall portfolio as well. We will be bringing back an item, hopefully in April, June timeframe. We're coming back to you all with an update on what the results of those impact evaluation is and whether it makes sense to scale Smart Home Flex into a larger program where we can open it up for more enrollments and have just a larger impact overall. So that's just a quick timeline on the program. If we go to the next slide, wanted to touch base a little bit about, we talked about our larger strategic goals as an organization. And I wanted to take it down just a notch into what are our goals for this pilot in particular. So really for this particular pilot, we really wanted to set out in a way to support the development of that 150 megawatt goal that I mentioned, and really test out the capabilities of our DERMS platform. So we've learned a lot over the last year in terms of what we can do, what we can't do just yet, what needs to be improved. There's been a lot. That was really part of the goal of Smart Home Flex in this initial pilot phase, was to learn as much as possible. So this is why you see gather data and lessons learned and then validate the value stream. And this is what we're going to be doing with our impact evaluation. On a more specific level, for me personally as the program manager, my goals were really to get 2,000 smart thermostats enrolled into the pilot. Make sure that when we're dispatching those thermostats and the events that we call, that we receive upwards of 90% of those thermostats participating in each event, as well as enroll 100 heat pump water heaters into Smart Home Flex so that we can test out that capability of how do we use water heaters as quote unquote a thermal battery, and then be able to shift water heating to times when energy is abundant and more renewable energy is abundant and costs are lower. So from here, I'm happy to report, if we go to the next slide, that we got really close to the 2,000 thermostat goal. We were just shy, just a little bit. We received over 1,900 smart thermostats that were enrolled. We had some that opted out of the program and some that we had to unenroll from the program because we weren't able to communicate with them. So we had to just let them go so that they didn't throw our numbers off. And over the course of the summer, we called 7 events. I know that this seems like a small amount of events, but I wanted to just note that it's been a really mild summer. It was a really mild summer overall. We were seeing this statewide. We talked to a lot of the CCAs throughout the state and asked, like, what are you doing with your Smart Home Flex-esque programs? How are you calling events? You know, what's your participation like this year? And everyone across the board was saying, we just haven't called events. It's been a really mild summer. We haven't seen really the reason to call these. A lot of the times we're calling them just to make sure people are still engaged with the program. So we did something here with 7 events. It's not as much as we could have done, but again, very small, mild summer. However, in those 7 events that we called, and I should note that we called them at different times, different days with different strategies. So on some, we did some pre-cooling where we sent a signal to the thermostat to turn on and cool before the event started. And others we didn't, all again in this attempt to learn as much as possible and gather lessons learned. So I'm happy to report that we exceeded our goal of having over 90% participation rate for all of these events. So we were seeing somewhere in the neighborhood of 95% participation for the thermostats responding to the signals that we were sending. If we go to the next slide, if you can't tell, I'm kind of really excited about this. And so I wanted to include just like as the nerd inside me, just to kind of give you like an idea of like, what is the data? What are we seeing when we call these events? And so here's just an example, an event that we called on August 22nd. So we sent out, we call an event, and when we do that, we send out both a text message and an email to all the customers that are enrolled, letting them know that there's an event that's going to come up. This is when it's going to start. This is how long it's going to go for. And in this case, we did some pre-cooling. So we also let them know that like to try and keep you as comfortable as possible, we're going to do some pre-cooling during this time as well. As you can see here, for the thermostats in this particular event, we had 1,600 smart thermostats that were participating or responding. So it's a smaller amount than the 1,900, but still a really good response rate. We, again, pre-cooled right now at half an hour before, and that's that light teal blue that you see. And you kind of see that little spike come up, right? So that's all the air conditioning turning on. And then as we approach the start of the event, which is that darker shadow blue, you see that significant drop in energy usage. So this is energy that's being reported and collected directly from the smart thermostats. So you can kind of see that when there's a drop, again, there's a little usage about an hour, and that's just the thermostats coming back or hitting that temperature threshold we told it, and then turning on a little bit to cool it, and then turning back off again until the end of the event, and then they turn back on to their preset temperature settings. So as you can see, this is working. We're seeing good success with this in terms of people and the smart thermostats are responding and they're performing. And I wanted to note that in particular for the numbers that we see that I showed here, these are not validated. These are preliminary estimates. And so once we do that evaluation, we'll have validated results to share with all of you. But these are the ones that we see on our dashboard saying that we have really good reduction in this particular event. Next slide, please. So on the water heater side, again, the Smart Home Flex has a component where we can enroll heat pump water heaters into our control. One of the really nice things is one of the successes that we've had with this program is that we became the default water heater rewards program for all tech incentivized water heaters. So Tech Clean California is a statewide program that incentivizes the installation of heat pump water heaters throughout the entire state, as I said. That one of the requirements is that if it's available in the territory, everyone needs to enroll in a water heater rewards program. We were the default for all of SDG territory, and we're successful in that. So we have a lot. The reason we're slow going at this point is we're waiting for all of those installations to go through for those water heaters to get incentivized, and then for those applications to start flowing in. So we do have a few. I want to say we have around 10 to 15 applications currently within the program from people that have installed the heat pump water heater through Tech. In this particular side, I wanted to just call out that we today actually approved 5 more Rheem Wi-Fi water heaters. So these are water heaters that are connected via Wi-Fi, and they're sending data to us and that we can actively control. So we can send a schedule to them and say, hey, ahead of the 4 to 9 p.m. peak, heat the water before so that everyone has hot water when that starts so that you don't have to heat during that time, even if there's usage, so that we can lower people's bills during that time. If the water heater needs to turn on for whatever reason, we've already have hot water ahead of that time. We're expanding our enrollment for water heaters into the program. We just completed a purchase of universal control modules or universal command modules. There are these tiny little devices that you can plug into a water heater and allows them to connect to the internet via a cell signal. And then we can send signals to them and say, here's the schedule, please respond to it. And this will allow us to add more than just Rheem water heaters. So it will allow us to expand to everyone. So we just completed that purchase. We're in the process of setting up the installation guides, all the shipping requirements, everything, so that we can start sending these out to customers. Hopefully, with the initial ones will start going out in December as on a test case, and then expand to everyone come Q1 of next year or January. So next slide, please. In terms of next steps, one of the things that I wanted to note is that as we wrapped up our summer, now comes the time to send out participation incentives. So as part of this program, when a customer enrolled, they received an enrollment incentive. And if they stayed in the program and responded to our events, they would be eligible to receive a $25 participation incentive. And so now that we wrapped up the summer, we're going to be sending those out over the next couple of weeks. As I mentioned before, we're conducting an evaluation of the Smart Home Flex pilot. And if the evaluation goes well, we will be coming back in 2026 and assessing whether to scale the pilot into a full program offering with additional budget support. And that is my update. I'll take any questions.
Fantastic, thank you. Sandra, do we have any public comment on this item?
We do not, Mr. Chair.
Perfect. I will now turn it over to the CAC members for comments and questions. Member Emerson.
So I have a Ream, one that I installed just earlier this year. I've been very happy with it. It's connected to Wi-Fi. It was interesting that sometimes, even though I had set different temperatures, that, and I found out about this later, that it was, I thought it was saved into the meter itself, but apparently they send it by server each time you have an hour. So sometimes it wasn't working. So I called them and they had to work on getting it fixed. So we're able to change the temperature. So what's the lowest temperature you would go with this kind of heat water?
Yeah,
what's the highest? I mean, I'm kind of interested in the range that you would use when you make the adjustments. And I'm a guinea pig if you want to hook me up.
For sure. Our strategy in approaching water heaters in particular is we don't want customers to be left without hot water at any point in time. And so our strategy is the reason why we made the pilot right now exclusive to tech incentivized heat pump water heaters is that as part of that program, all customers need to install what's called a thermostatic mixing valve. What this valve does is it allows the water heater or allows us to heat the water up to 140 degrees Fahrenheit without causing a huge risk for burns or scalding at the tap because it mixes in cold water as it's flowing out into the home. So this mixing valve is really important. And one of the requirements of the tech is that this needs to be installed. And so we relied on their expertise and validation of that to make sure that we're not burning customers or at risk of burning.
The company that installed mine actually put in one of those.
Perfect. Yeah.
You have to, if you want to use it as full capability, you have to. Yes. Do some settings.
Yeah, so we can, when we send the signals to the water heaters, we can send it up to 140. And then when we turn it off, if you will, we don't really turn it off. What we say is lower your temperature settings to 110. So that it doesn't turn off at any point. We don't have this like huge load up trying to get really cold water up to 110. So it really is a way for customers to ride out that peak period.
How do you know that the mixing valve has been adjusted for those capabilities?
The mixing valve is automatic, so it automatically. I wouldn't want to get into the physics of it because it's beyond the material science.
Discuss later, but I question that. I think we should have a dialogue.
Yeah.
And another. And then there's a home setting, and then there's high load setting. Those are features that can be turned on and off.
Yeah, those are the ways we can control it as well.
Yeah.
Now, my house might be an anomaly, so tell me if I'm a one of a kind. But I almost never close my windows in my house ever. Okay, the only time I ever close it is maybe a month or two, and we do have air conditioning. And I haven't used heat in my house because it's solar heats from windows for 10 months. So if there's at least some percentage of people that are like me, that like to live in the clean outdoor air of San Diego, how would that work for them? Or would it not at all?
In terms of the existing capabilities of the pilot using thermostats, then we probably wouldn't enroll them because they're not turning on their AC usage during the summer. That's why we're evaluating other ways of making sure that we can get more participation from others via a behavioral program, pool pumps if they have any, or just other technologies that may exist in their home. So yes.
Do you have any idea the extent to which people use their heat or electricity, their heat or air conditioning at all?
We have some idea on the AC usage. Heating is a little more complicated because what we don't want to do is control, because most heating is done by gas. There's really not a huge savings on electricity. But we're asking residents when they apply for this program is if they use a heat pump to heat their home. And in that case, we can have more control over heating as well. Thanks.
Very quick. I know you're disappointed that you can touch down on this, but I'm sure you're going to be very happy too.
Any other comments? I do have a quick question, and this is, I don't know if this would fall underneath your purview. When we are talking about the heat pump water heaters, I understand why that would be a discussion for the flex program because it allows you to flex the point of time for electrical consumption. Is there a discussion, and I don't know if it's relevant, of a heat pump versus an instantaneous electrical water heater? What are the trade-offs and benefits of the different methodologies of heating water? And is a heat pump overall more efficient, or is an instantaneous one? I don't know if that would fall under your knowledge or purview.
It would.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think to answer your last question around the efficiency, heat pump water heaters are extremely efficient, more so than instantaneous, because essentially they're just moving air or heat from one area to the next or from the outside into the tank. So they're super efficient at doing that as opposed to having to create heat via the instantaneous route. The reason we focus on heat pump water heaters in particular is because of that tank of water that's sitting there. So it's think of it as like a thermal battery, right? So we can heat that water up to higher degrees and it stays there. We've looked at the analysis. Some of the water heaters are reporting to see like how long does it take to lose heat on a tank? And it is hours for it to drop like even just 5 degrees. So it's really efficient way for us to heat the water and then store it for that when people use it, they're drawing from the water heater as opposed to have to heat as they're using. So it's a really easy way for us to heat ahead of time, heat during the day when there's renewable energy. And that's really our strategy at this point for the difference in that.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Just to add to that, like it's mentioned, there are two settings. There's an echo setting, which uses more of the heat pump, and a high demand setting. And I had to use that when our disabled son came one weekend, we needed a lot more water. I turned it on, cold water was coming in, and I could see on my solar energy, they were pulling a lot more energy because they had coils that were being used instead of the heat, or increasing the heat, because of the high demand. So that was a big difference in the.
And is that how conventional electric water heater works with coils?
Yes, yeah. Same thing, the resistive coils inside that heat up the
Those
water.
use a lot of energy.
Yes, versus the heat pump just moves heat from the environment into the tank.
Seeing no other comments, thank you so much for your time and presentation. This is a receive and file item and no further action is needed. All right. We will now move on to item 11, update on California Energy Commission Grant Agreement EPC 25-015. I will turn it over to staff to provide the presentation.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Rachel Slick. I'm the Vehicle Grid Integration Program Manager at Community Power, and I promise my presentation is very short. So to give some context for the grant agreement, it's important that I talk a little bit about our V1G pilot, just a refresher for those in the room. V1G is really just a term for unidirectional managed charging, not to be confused with V2G or bidirectional charging, where energy can flow from the vehicle back into the grid. This is just related to vehicles taking energy from the grid and being able to control the power rate at which they do so, as well as the time. We launched EV Flex Connect, our V1G pilot, in February of this year. It's focused on residential customers that charge their eligible EV at home. Our scope includes enrolling about 1,000 participants, creating optimized charging schedules for these participants, and monitoring their charging activity. Our main goal is to learn about the load shifting capabilities of EVs, how much are we really able to do with an asset like that, and the value that they provide to community power. Next slide. The California Energy Commission periodically releases grant funding opportunities, or GFOs. A little over a year ago, they released one for projects that would increase the value proposition of distributed energy resources to customers and the grid. There were 3 distinct project groups. One of those related to identifying vehicle grid integration knowledge gaps. We saw this as a great opportunity to leverage our existing pilot to secure funding for an analysis of this pilot and really do a deep dive into the value of V1G strategies for community power. And this is a much more in-depth analysis than we would have been able to do without receiving external funding. We partnered with researchers at Pacific Northwest National Lab on the proposal for PNNL. We're really excited to be able to do this. They have a ton of experience in research, specifically with electric grid modernization and transportation electrification. Really, they're a dream lab to work with on something like this. We were also able to secure an agreement with San Diego Gas and Electric to support this research by providing distribution system operations data that we would not be able to get otherwise. Next slide. A brief walkthrough of what the grant opportunity and agreement process looks like. The funding opportunity was released in October of 2024. The first phase involved submitting a project abstract. It was due in December of last year. We partnered with PNNL on this. The following month in January, we received notification that our abstract did pass, and we were invited to submit a full project application. This was a beast of an application. They always are for the CEC. We completed it and submitted it in March. In May, the CEC posted the list of proposed awards, which included our project as one of 2 selected for this specific category. Just want to take a moment to highlight how exciting that is. A lot of people think managed charging is something that's already been proven. And as far as the technology goes, sure, we know that we can manage charging. But to see our proposal as something that really contributes to VGI knowledge gaps, that we're doing something new that hasn't been done in this space, even though managed charging has been around for quite a while, is really exciting and shows that we're thinking about this in an innovative way that's going to be helpful, not just for community power, but for all those serving entities around the state. After this list of proposed awards was released, we worked with the CEC throughout the summer to finalize the grant agreement documents. At their September business meeting a couple of months ago, the commissioners unanimously approved our project. Next slide. And to talk a little bit about the project itself, it's the Charging Harmonization and Analysis for Resilient Grid Efficient Utilization and Planning Project. I don't think I'll ever be able to memorize that, so it's just called the Charge Up Project, much simpler. We'll analyze and quantify the value of advanced managed charging, or V1G strategies, in balancing bulk system and distribution operational needs. It's very necessary to have a better understanding of how to balance these, how do we value them separately together, how can we value stack for customers that are involved in a program like this. Grant Agreement EPC 25015 outlines the Charge Up project, has the relevant documentation on the scope of work, the technical requirements, everything that's needed. The total awarded amount, course, pending board approval next week, just under $700,000. We'll be passing along about 90% of this to PNNL because they're taking on the vast majority of the analytical work. We'll be keeping about 10% for project management tasks, coordinating engagement with our ongoing pilot, and contributing our expertise on CCA operations as well as resource planning. So it's just PNNL and Community Power that will be receiving grant funding, but we do have additional partners. That is SDG&E and Optiwatt. Optiwatt is our B1G software provider. As mentioned before, SDG&E will share distribution system data and their expertise on distribution operations, and Optiwatt will support our pilot engagement and the implementation of managed charging strategies. That is the end of my presentation.
Sandra, do we have any public comment on this item? I will now turn it over to the CAC members for comments and questions. Seeing no comments, I do have one question for you. I don't know if this would be as relevant to this specific item, but I remember in a previous conversation or previous presentation, there was a discussion of as more electrical vehicles are coming onto the grid, the traditional window of low peak charging is, I believe, midnight to 6 a.m. But then there are more vehicles coming onto the grid, and then those vehicles are having larger batteries. I'm thinking about my personal battery is 100 kilowatt hours on my vehicle. And with the Level 2 charger at home, it can take up to about 12 to 14 hours to fully charge it. Is there a discussion of how that kind of plays into this type of program, or like informing community members about, you know, priorities or, you know, methodology of charging electrical vehicles? I imagine that there's evolving components of like how large vehicle batteries are, when to charge, things like that. So does that kind of make sense?
I think I understand your question, but let me know if this doesn't answer it. So yeah, with our super off-peak hours being between midnight and 6 a.m., we're seeing our time of use rates work well and influencing when people charge their cars. But then we are seeing this increasingly massive secondary peak around midnight as people have programmed either their cars directly or their charging stations to start charging their vehicles. And yeah, batteries are getting bigger, which is a good thing. Range anxiety is real and it helps people adopt EVs. But that's even more strain on the grid during those times. A lot of people don't drive so much daily that they need to charge their entire battery in a 6-hour window, fortunately. And a lot of people don't charge all the way to 100% because that's not great for battery health. So what we've seen so far, it's still relatively early in the pilot, is that people are able to meet their charging needs in that 6-hour window. We're doing our best to smooth out the charging in those 6 hours so that we're not seeing like this huge peak at midnight that then gradually lowers. And a lot of people, they only need to charge their vehicle to, I don't know, maybe 80%, and it just takes an hour. There's no reason to be doing that at midnight. We can wait until 2 or 3 a.m. To smooth it out more. But we'll also be trying different strategies once we can officially get going on this project. PNNL will help with that so that we can better understand who we can be targeting with strategies like this. Once we have distribution data from SDG&E, it'll also give us a better idea of which feeders are more specifically impacted, like in neighborhoods that have a lot more EVs. Because if, as community power, we're not paying attention to that, we don't necessarily need to, we're not responsible for the distribution system. It could be really overloading feeders in specific areas. They'll ultimately need to be replaced much faster. Substations will need to be replaced quicker, passing on just higher transmission distribution costs to our customers as well.
Thank you for that. Member Emerson, did you have a comment?
So between midnight and 6 a.m.?
Yeah.
What's the best battery charge if it's not midnight? Is there a super upbeat that you recommend?
Maybe we've tiered our time of use tiers. Yeah, current tiers, within tiers.
If I charge myself after midnight, I don't do it at midnight, 2 or 3. In fact, if I pick a time, it's like 3:10, you know. If I'm not charging during the daytime when there's a lot of sunshine. So I personally pick a time that's I recognize the issue that you mentioned.
Okay, that's kind of.
What is the Optiwas actually do? Optiwas, what are they gonna do?
They're a software providers. We're already working with them on the pilot. And people are able to connect their vehicles to Optiwas platform, give Optiwas permissions to control the charging. Of course, participants can override this at any point if they decide that they need to charge at 4 p.m. for whatever reason.
They have to install a particular device in the car?
It's through the car's API. There's no device specific. It's using a telematics system.
Seeing no other comments, thank you so much. This is a receive and file item and no further action is needed. So much. We will now move on to item 12, creation of a 2026 CAC work plan ad hoc committee. I will turn it over to staff to provide a brief overview of ad hoc committee procedures, which will apply to the remaining 2 items on the agenda.
Yes, good evening, everybody. My name is Yamalis Crespo, Senior Community Engagement Manager, providing you with an overview of how we go about creating and actually going about ad hoc committees. So for our CAC policies, the CAC may create ad hoc committees to address issues more in depth outside of regular meetings to bring back as recommendations to the CAC. Ad hoc committees are temporary committees appointed for a specific purpose, such as updating the work plan. They're a great educational opportunity as members get the opportunity to learn from and collaborate directly with staff to do a deep dive on specific topics. And the CAC may establish temporary ad hoc advisory committees that are composed of less than a quorum of the CAC, have no continuing subject matter jurisdiction, and have no meeting schedule fixed by motion or other formal action of the CAC. Such temporary ad hoc committees are not subject to Brown Act noticing and meeting requirements. And the CAC chair will seek volunteers during a CAC regular meeting to form an ad hoc, working to ensure all members have a chance to participate on various groups. To discuss and recommend revisions to last year's CAC work plan, the CAC established a 2025 CAC work plan ad hoc committee during our December 2024 meeting. Then CAC Chair Vasquez from the City of San Diego appointed former member Johns from Encinitas, member Emerson from National City, and member Harris from La Mesa to participate. Staff then presented a final draft of the 2025 CAC work plan that reflected the ample feedback of ad hoc committee members to the full CAC, and then the board unanimously approved it. Community Power staff expects to create a preliminary draft of the 2026 work plan to facilitate the discussion among 2 to 3 volunteers during at least one virtual meeting to take place before February 2026. And that ends my presentation.
Thank you. Sandra, do we have any public comment on this? I will now turn it over to the CAC members for a motion and discussion. My recommendation is that we approve the creation of the 2026 Community Advisory Committee Work Plan Committee and assign volunteers. Secretary Pike would like to make the motion. A motion, do I have a second?
I'm seconding.
Great, second by member Scalfani. Clerk, please call the vote.
Any discussion?
I'm sorry, I opened it up to
Oh,
discussion.
sorry, I didn't hear. But I thought, does it make sense to discuss both of these ad hoc committees at the same time and understand the difference?
So they all require separate motions to create each of them separately and to assign members separately. So I will be discussing the scope of the other ones as well. So I guess keep an eye out if you want to participate in specific one.
I'm not sure what the purview is of this committee. They're going to create a work plan to bring this to committee so we can adopt a work plan.
So they are going to be creating the draft of this meeting that this committee will actually be approving and then recommending for the board for approval, which is it's a process that takes
And it's a work plan for who?
for the committee, for the CAC. Correct.
Let's clarify, there's an existing work plan.
Correct.
This purpose is to review it and update.
Correct.
As appropriate.
Yes. For next year. For our policies and procedures, we do this on an annual basis.
So that's why I wanted to know what the community power plan review was gonna be about. I don't understand what that,
That is a separate committee.
I understand.
Yeah.
It's separate, though.
Any other questions or comments? We do have a motion and a second for the creation of this ad hoc committee. Will you please call the. Aye.
Committee Member Gonzalez.
Aye.
Committee Member Hammond.
Sorry, my
Member-
son's sick and he was asking.
Committee Member White.
Aye.
Committee Member Anderson.
I abstain.
Committee Member Sumner.
Aye.
Committee Member Emerson.
I abstain too.
Secretary Pike.
Aye.
Vice Chair Taylor Evans.
Aye. Thank you.
Going back to Hammond.
Committee Member Hammond, did you?
Yes, so sorry, my son is sick and needed me for a second.
Thank you.
With that motion passing, would any CAC members like to volunteer for the 2026 Community Advisory Committee Work Plan Ad Hoc Committee?
I think I make a comment.
Please.
So to the point of Emerson, I think some people may be thinking about allocation of their own time. For what it's worth, I intend and hope to serve on the local infill ad hoc committee if the committee is formed. But if this CAC work plan ad hoc committee needs resources, I'm willing to volunteer for that as well.
Thank you for that.
Echo that. My intention was to just volunteer for the power plant committee.
What did you say?
My intention was to volunteer for the power plant committee, but if need be, I would also. But I'd like to ask committee member Emerson, would you like to serve on it again? Since you did it last year?
No, I was more interested to find out more about the power plant committee and what it was entailed with that. I was decided on that.
I have a good question, council. Sure. Because there seems to be some confusion on the purview of these committees, can we have an overview of all three before we select the appointments?
The chair can absolutely choose to have the presentations be done at this point and then take separate motions for each ad hoc committee.
Great.
And I would also point out that the votes are to establish the ad hoc committees.
And
We don't need to vote, you don't need to vote on who's gonna be on the ad hoc committee. The volunteers can be selected later, so you can just vote on the committees now. And then later on, the chair can, there can be communication outside this meeting to volunteer.
Does the volunteering have to be approved by the CAC or is that an individual person by person?
It does not need to be approved by the CAC.
Can I just make a point? The staff reports have the scope of each one of these committees, so you have that at your fingertips right now. If you want to give it a quick read.
I'm also happy to provide more information on the scope, which I worked with the chair after them today's meeting to be able to provide, since the following two, committees that we are considering to create were actually at the request of Chair David Harris. So the creation of a community power plant review ad hoc committee, and by me, Mr. Chair.
Please.
The scope as proposed by the chair for this particular committee would be to evaluate the progress made toward implementation of the goals and actions outlined in the 5-year community power plan. Specifically, the committee would assess program and project outcomes, measure successes, and identify areas for improvement, if any. The committee will use publicly available documents and data to better understand community power's programming impact and engagement. The ad hoc committee will commit to developing actionable recommendations to support staff in strengthening the effectiveness in advancing the plan's objectives. So given the size of the CAC roster and the multiple ad hoc committees being considered tonight, staff does recommend 2 to 3 volunteers make up this committee, which we suggest meet virtually for up to 3 times or until the scope of work described has been completed. Ad hoc committee members would be expected to provide community power staff with a draft of their findings for review and discussion, after which they will jointly determine the next course of action to share their results to the larger CAC. So that's the first one. For the scope as proposed by the chair of the Distributed Energy Resources Local Info Ad Hoc Committee will include reviewing procurement strategies, financing issues, and economic incentives as community power plans to meet a strategic goal of developing current 300 megawatts of local distributed energy resources over the next 10 years. Specifically, it will focus on the feed-in tariff procurement program and discuss strategies on how small-scale projects may be financially feasible in the current environment. The committee will learn about what type of incentives that are necessary to attract developers and what success can look like when trying to find potential sites for these projects. Again, given the size of the roster and the multiple ad hoc committees, we do recommend 2 to 3 volunteers to make up this committee. And we suggest that it meets virtually for up to 3 times or until the scope of work has been completed. So members would be expected to provide an ad hoc committee report to communicate activities and lessons learned to the full CAC. So we hear from both committees as to the activities that they undertook while it was active.
Just to confirm, though, that would have been the equivalent of the presentation of items 12 and 13. Sandra, do we have any public comment on either of those items?
We do not, Mr. Chair.
Great. I would like to open it up for any additional conversation, as well as provide, let's say, 1 minute for the committee members to review the presentation. Take any notes if there were any specific that they would like to volunteer on. And then I will open it up for a motion. So give you all a moment, and please let me know if you need any additional time or would like any discussion.
Just clarification. So, are you going to be calling for nominations or not?
Yes.
You are.
We'll do the motion to create the committees first.
Great.
And then post the creation of the 3 committees, we can go back and request nominations. Please.
Just a general comment. You speak very eloquently, but very quickly. And I absorb more by reading, but none of that information is in the documents that we have in front of us. So, again, the power plan review and the energy resource, local infill, it's easier for me if I'm reading, I can absorb what is supposed to be involved rather than just one topic. But here, each of these just says, it's just talking about ad hoc committee, and the definition of ad hoc committee, not what each committee was going to do. So it's hard for me to, but the work plan, I was involved last year, so I don't need to be involved. But kind of interested in the power plan. Can you explain again the power plan?
So it would review, it would evaluate the progress made toward implementation of the goals and actions outlined in the community power plan. So specifically, the committee members would assess.
So the power plan is not in front of us, right?
We're not talking about the community power plan specifically. We're talking about the creation of a committee to review. I'm happy to share that.
The power plan is not in front of us. Understand what we're going to be reviewing.
It's easily accessible and I'm happy to, point it out to you.
Right on the power plan. So the power plan engagement strategy that we executed several years ago to inform all of our program design. So this ad hoc committee would be ad hoc committee to evaluate how we're doing in terms of that power plan. Again, that's a document you've already read. It's been up and posted to our website for several years. So it's sort of checking on how we're doing, propose, what potentially we should be doing moving forward.
And this distributed energy resource and open infill is related to that.
No, so the distributed energy resource local infill is a subset of a lot of our goals, right? So we've got 300 megawatts worth of capacity goals we're trying to target here. 300 megawatts that are locally infill. 150 of those 300 our programmatic goals, moving through our virtual power plan, which leaves another 150 megawatts that is specifically targeted to this task right here. So other distributed energy resources, other local infill, so other work outside of the virtual power plant.
Yeah, can we vote on just establishing the committees now and then maybe staff giving us some written definitions of what each committee will do?
Of course, I think the best thing for us to be able to do that is to finish that discussion. Then we'll go ahead through the procedural process of voting on the creation. And then we can come back if you have additional questions for the nominations. So I just want to make sure that prior to the voting of the creation of the ad hocs, any discussion about the process of creating the ad hocs is available now. Prior to the vote.
Is staff seeking to fill them today, or could we empower the chair and the officers to handle that?
Absolutely. It's an ad hoc committee, so it's not subject to the Brown Act, as long as it's the members, so the number of members less than the quorum. You guys can go have coffee somewhere and talk about the subject matter.
Do we need to include that in the motion to empower the chair to?
It's already in the, I believe it's already in the
Okay,
staff
perfect.
report, there's the chair.
That's the clarifying question. For the clarifying information. So we do have. I believe we have two more left. We've successfully gone through the creation of one ad hoc committee. May I have a motion to approve the creation of the 2026 Community Advisory Committee? Should I get the wording correctly? We did, and that's where I realized that I was at. May I have a motion to approve the creation of a Community Power Plan Review Ad Hoc Committee? Motion by Member Sumner, second by Secretary Pike. Clerk, please call the roll.
Committee member Sylvan.
Aye.
Committee member Gonzalez. Aye. Committee member Hammond.
Aye.
Committee member Hoyt. Committee member Anderson.
I'm gonna abstain again.
Committee member Sumner.
Aye.
Committee member Emerson.
When I abstain again.
Secretary Pike.
Aye.
Vice Chair Montero Adams.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. One final space for comments. I believe we might be ready to call for a motion or any other comments on the creation of that.
Is there not a third one?
No, we haven't.
Yes, just
14.
Great. Well, then, may I have a motion to approve the creation of a Community Power Plan Review Ad Hoc Committee?
Next one. It's 14.
That's
13.
That's
14.
Not 14 is, it's distributed energy. That's what.
Energy resource.
That's what.
Thank you very much. May I have a motion for the creation of a Distributed Energy Resources Local?
Second.
So moved by Secretary Pike, seconded by Member Sumner. Clerk, may you please call the votes?
There were no public comments. Committee member Sylvan. Committee member Gonzalez. Aye. Committee member Hammond.
Aye.
Committee member Hoyt.
Aye.
Committee member Anderson.
I abstain.
Committee member Sumner.
Aye.
Committee member Emerson.
Aye.
Secretary Pike.
Aye.
Vice Chair Montero Adams.
Fantastic. Having successfully passed the creation of the three ad hoc committees, there's a desire for additional discussion as to the goals of the membership of those committees. I will also state that in direct communication with the chair, David Harris did request that he be nominated to participate on the Community Power Plan Review Ad Hoc Committee. And having spoken with him, confirmed that he would serve if elected to participate. Are there any other discussions, questions about participation or membership in any of the three ad hoc committees?
It sounds like from the committee members, they would like to see some sort of a memo in writing, and then we can solicit interest, and then the officers can review that at our next meeting.
Okay. Is everyone comfortable with that, or any additional questions, comments at this time?
Yeah, I mean, if we can make nominations now, can we do that now just for consideration?
We can.
Go ahead.
Please.
Yeah, so I'd like to nominate also David Harris for the Distributed Energy Resources and Film Committee, and myself as well for that committee for consideration.
Perfect.
Do we need nominations, or do we just approach the chair sometime and say, I'd like to be on? See, I'm not prepared to be on any committee.
Sure.
It's,
Yes.
so I don't, please don't nominate me for anything. Read the damn thing, and so I can,
It's,
then make a commitment.
it sounds like, based on the committees, the rest of the committee members are discussing, they'd like to see a memo describing what this committees are. And at that point, if they are interested, they will reach out to the chair. They're interested. And then from that point on, I guess if there are more than the quorum that's interested, the chair will have that decision to make on who should be on that committee, and then it could be reported at next.
Stephen, are we able to task you with passing along the nominations that we've heard here tonight, to ensure that Chair Harris receives those nominations, and then work alongside the chair to ensure that the successful completion of the ad hoc committee members?
I also work with the chair to fine tune the descriptions, because I'm just working directly with him. Yes.
I know that he wishes he was here, and unfortunately, other pressing items took him away, but I'm excited for the creation of the three ad hoc committees, and looking forward to that additional information so that everyone feels informed for their full participation.
May I ask the other committee members, do you want to get that information when you feel more comfortable, or do you want questions tonight about the committees? I just want to make sure everyone's.
My feedback was that because you mentioned waiting until the next meeting to get to finalize who would be on which, now I would just suggest that we don't have to wait. It sounds like we could correspond, email, confirm what everybody is interested in the meantime.
Once the chair is back and available, we'll ensure that he receives all the notes for today's meeting, and he'll be able to have these conversations. Great. That is the end of our specific items. We will now move on to our standing items. Standing items are discussion of potential agenda items for the Board of Directors meetings. As a reminder, the CAC may suggest agenda items for a Board of Directors meeting agenda by communicating with the CAC chair and designated community power staff before and or after a regular CAC meeting. If suggested at this time, there shall be no discussion or action by the CAC unless the item has been included on the CAC agenda. Do any of our CAC members have recommendations on potential items for our Board of Directors? Seeing none, thank you. Let's move on to the committee member announcements. Do any of our CAC members have any items they'd like to share today? I believe Member Sumner would like to provide us with a report on October board activities.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate it. Bear with me. I will move along in a steady flow here. The Board of Directors of the San Diego Community Power met on October 23rd to consider 15 items on consent. The regular agenda items. The introduction, Councilmember Suzuki offered a moment of silence for Officer Lauren Craven, who's tragically killed in the line of duty while helping a motorist. New community power staff are welcomed by the board. No items were added or reordered on the agenda. No non-agenda public comments. Consent agenda items 1 through 15 were approved. No public comment. On action, similar to the last CAC, the board received an update on the San Diego Regional Energy Academy, in which directors discussed the academy's strategic goals, board interest, participating in more educational opportunities, and expanding the community's nonprofit represented. space. Directors received presentations on the FY 2024-25 financial audit progress report. The San Diego Regional Energy Network directors asked to assist with program implementation, ask questions on eligibility, and program specifics. Board also adopted a resolution approving a third revision to the financial reserves policy after asking some questions about liquidity and target timelines. Approved an agreement with Aspen Environmental Group for long-term load forecasting after discussion about what compromises financial modeling and in-house scenario analysis by controlling inputs. Approved a master agreement with Yes Energy LLC for short-term load forecasting services. Questions about direct impacts to ratepayer savings and the company's qualifications. Approved a First Amendment to the voluntary allocation market offer confirmation with San Diego Gas and Electric, and approved an amended and restated energy storage service agreement for Chula Vista Energy Center 2. There were no board member announcements. The meeting was adjourned. That concludes my report on the October 23rd Board of Directors meeting, and thank you to staff for the support.
Thank you, Member Sumner. Would any member like to volunteer to provide a report on the next Board of Directors meeting during the December EAC meeting? I will actually state that I am looking forward to the next Board of Directors meeting to get the portion of the presentation we didn't receive on fire safety from the fire chief. So I'm happy to attend, take notes, and report back to this body in December. Are there any other committee member announcements?
Again, just more clarification on the Chula Vista energy storage thing that was voted on.
Yeah, I'd like to ask that.
What was that? You can explain more details of what that was about, or?
There were a couple of items that I missed out on.
Oh.
But staff has the information they can provide.
Would be something that could be sent out via email?
Happy to follow up with information, but all of this is also publicly available as part of the Board of Directors item. Happy to follow.
Okay. Yeah. And just to follow up on the ad hoc, if we were going to be reviewing the community power plan, is there a list? I know the website has all that information, but is there like a list of which plans specifically we want to review? Is there like a list, or do we just look at the whole document? Is it focused?
It's up to the committee to decide the scope of work, but the idea would be the entire community power plan.
That might be something for you to discuss with the chair. And I think that can be discussed as part of the scope. Seeing no other member announcements, that brings us to the end of our agenda. I appreciate everyone's participation today. We are adjourned until our next regularly scheduled meeting on December 4th, 2025 at 5:30 p.m. at the Port of San Diego. Thank you. We are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.